Assalamualaikum, salam sejahtera, good day, tajahau. Yang berbahagia, Datuk Profesor Dr. Nasruddin Muhammad, Director, Higher Education Leadership Academic, AKEPT, Associate Professor Dr. Zaini Sakawi, Director, Institute of Climate Change, Universiti Kebangsaan Malaysia, Mr. Azrul Izham Hamzah, Deputy Director, Center for Leadership Sustainability, AKEPT, our honorable panelists, Professor Simon Redfern, Dean, College of Science, President's Chairs in Earth Sciences, Asian School of the Environment, Nanyang Technological University, Singapore, Associate Professor Dr. Siri Suparatit, Director, Climate Change and Disaster Center, Rangsit University, Pathum Thani, Thailand, Dr. Meridian Alam, Assistant Professor of Sociology and Anthropology Department, University of Brunei Darussalam, Associate Professor Dr. Zaini bin Sakawi, Director, Institute of Climate Change, Universiti Kebangsaan Malaysia, and our moderator, Associate Professor Dr. Wan Hana Malini, Wan Mokhtar, Head of Environmental Management Center, Institute of Climate Change, Universiti Kebangsaan Malaysia, Selangor. Universities representative from Malaysia and across Southeast Asian nation, honorable guests and participants from across the world who join us today. Welcome to Climate Leaders webinar series, Leading the Action Against Climate Change, supported by Higher Education Leadership Academic, AKEPT, and organized by Institute of Climate Change, Universiti Kebangsaan Malaysia, with a team, universities and sustainable communities towards a green agenda. My name is Zifazin Hashim from Institute of Climate Change, Universiti Kebangsaan Malaysia, and I'm your MC for today. Ladies and gentlemen, global warming phenomenon due to the emission of greenhouse gases, GHG, from human activities greatly affects the global climate system, and the phenomenon is now at an alarming level. The Southeast Asian region recorded the top position in terms of the number of disaster events in the last 30 years, with more than 90% of them categorized as climate disasters. And countries in Southeast Asia need to pay more serious attention and need to develop an holistic approach and comprehensive strategy to tackle these climate emergency issues. The university, as one of the birthplaces of mature education, is an instrument that can form a unity in dealing with climate change using the medium of knowledge as a factor to equalize the position. This webinar aims at exploring how universities can play an important role in addressing the effect and impact of climate change, and how universities can make a significant contribution to the global local community by equipping graduates with comprehensive knowledge and providing global awareness of the impact of climate change, as well as the challenges and success stories. Without further ado, I would like to welcome Associate Professor Dr. Zaini Sakawi, Director of Institute of Climate Change, to say a few words. Thank you.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Salam sejahtera and very good morning. Salam satu Malaysia and salam satu Universiti Kebangsaan Malaysia as a Universiti Watan. Yang berbahagia Profesor Datuk Dr. Nasruddin bin Muhammad, our Director, Higher Education Leadership Academics, Mr. Azrul Izham Hamzah, Deputy Director, Center for Leadership Sustainability, also from Higher Education Leadership Academics, our honorable speakers, Professor Simon Redfern from Nanyang Technological University, Singapore, Associate Professor Dr. Meridian Alam from University Brunei Darussalam, also Associate Professor Dr. Seri Suparatit from Rangsit University, Thailand, and our moderator, Associate Professor Dr. Wan Hana Malini Wan Mokhtar, Heads of Environmental Management Center, also from Institute of Climate Change. And it is my pleasure to welcome all the participants today for the half-day webinar. Ladies and gentlemen, it's give me a great pleasure to be with you this morning, and I wish to extend a very warm welcome to the Climate Leaders webinar series, Leading the Action Against Climate Change, organized by the Institute of Climate Change, Universiti Kebangsaan Malaysia, and supported by Highest Education Leadership Academic, Ministry of Higher Education, Malaysia. Thank you for being with us this morning. I hope you all safe and in good health as you join us in this program that we will discuss on a very important and hot topic on climate change. This program gather leaders in climate change across the Association of Southeast Asian regions to share their insight and thought on related issues surrounding climate change and focus on the change that can be brought at the institutional levels through leadership in different parts of the university and the ways that the community can work together to fulfill the missions of sustainability. Today, we are honored to have the distinguished panel of experts to share their experience and wisdom as university expert in climate change. Thank you for taking the time to be with us. We are very here today on the first series of climate leadership webinar program with the teams University and Sustainable Community toward a green agendas, emphasizing on the roles of the universities to fight for a sustainable world and against climate change. Ladies and gentlemen, higher education and research can make a significant contribution to both climate protections and sustainable future. And yet, there is still room for improvements. In many cases, universities have not yet reached their full potential impacts. The lack of coherent institutional visions or strategy or the distractions of competing structurals and financial constraints might prevent universities from focusing on climate protection and sustainable development. The United Nations Agenda 2030 and the 17 Sustainable Development Goals have provided a global framework for working toward sustainability. Education through formal institutions and public awareness raisings is essential for both mitigations and adaptation efforts and sustainable development as a whole. It is time to make the contributions of universities more visible. Ladies and gentlemen, to facilitate climate actions in a creative way, new forms of collaborations are needed, which will lead to increased transformative potential for individuals, for the economics and society as a whole. Against these backgrounds, academic community partnership can serve as an innovation format for collaborations. However, to ensure that this partnership develop to their full potentials, they must be designed in such a way that all involved can participate effectively. Consequently, the question arises of what the success factors and conditions for effective practice are for academic community partnership, focusing on climate change, adaptation, and mitigation. So through these kinds of platform, the sharing of the climate expert insight will help the academic society to think of innovation inventions that will assist to enhance the highest education delivery to the community, particularly in the new norms. This webinar aims at exploring how universities can play an important role in addressing the effects and impacts of climate change. Also, how university can make a significant contribution to the global local community by equipping graduates with comprehensive knowledge and providing a global awareness of the impacts of climate change, as well as the challenges and success stories. Ladies and gentlemen, as the organizer of the webinar, we are proud to share a knowledge sharing session today by the experts on the insight and strategies as leaders in climate change fields. I hope that this webinar will be an informative platform on how leaders and academics from universities can provide a message education to form a unity in dealing climate crisis using the medium of knowledge as a tools, and also to contribute greatly to the local community by providing global awareness of the impacts of the climate change. My hope that this will be a fruitful webinar for all, and I look forward to witnessing the second series of Climate Leaders webinar programs becoming an agenda for the betterment of climate leaders in the future. I hope that today inspires ideas and discussions around the ways that we can make our environments a better place. Thank you very much. Wabillahi taufiq wa hidayah. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you.
Waalaikumsalam. Thank you very much, Associate Professor Dr. Zaini Sakawi, for the welcoming remarks. Next, I would like to invite Mr. Azrul Izham Hamza, Deputy Director, Center for Leadership Sustainability, AKEPT, for the opening remarks. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Z. Fazlin. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, and a very good morning. I wish to Associate Prof. Dr. Zaini Sakawi, the Director of Institute Climate Change, or IPI, Program Leader from University Kebangsaan Malaysia, our distinguished speakers, Professor Dr. Simon Redfern from ASEAN School of the Environment, Nanyang Technology of Singapore, Nanyang Technology University of Singapore, Dr. Meridian Alam, Sociology Anthropology Department of University of Brunei Darussalam, Associate Prof. Dr. Sari Suparatit, I hope I pronounced your name correctly, Climate Change and Disaster Center, Rangsit University Bangkok of Thailand, and of course, Associate Prof. Dr. Zaini Sakawi himself as one of our panelists also. And this program will be led and moderated by Associate Prof. Dr. Wan Hana Malini Wan Mota, the Head of Environmental Management Center, Institute of Climate Change of UKM. First and foremost, I would like to convey the regards and the salam of our director, Dr. Nas, for not be able to make it today in this forum because of another commitment that he has to attend to. Ladies and gentlemen, my fellow honorable speakers and participants, I wish to extend a very warm welcome to the 2022 AKEPT Global Series webinar on climate leaders leading the action against climate change with the theme Universities and Sustainable Communities Towards a Green Agenda, a collaborative effort between AKEPT, the Higher Education Leadership Academy, and University Kebangsaan Malaysia, or UKM. This platform gathers leaders and experts throughout this region, throughout the ASEAN region, in order for us to share, to gain, engage their insights and thoughts in related to issues surrounding climate change and green agenda among the higher learning institution community. Ladies and gentlemen, as we are aware, the implementation of UN Agenda as a whole and the SDG in particular require actions at all levels. At the local level, it is believed that the university community partnership may be useful in many ways. Firstly, by helping contextualize and by offering a broader understanding of the many issues concerning and the challenges which the people face in their communities. And secondly, by demonstrating the role of collaboration and contributing to the search for problems seen at the community level. And lastly, by supporting communities in implementing local action towards sustainable goals connected with the community life. So it's basically interrelated, not only within the higher institutional community, but it also will reflect towards the main community as a whole. Through this webinar, we will hear from the experts throughout this region. We have experts from Brunei, Singapore, Thailand, and of course, from our local here in Malaysia, in the field of their current work, as well as their thoughts and opinions regarding issues related to universities and communities in the context of SDG. The speakers will be looking at matters related to sustainable development from different perspectives and across a variety of audiences. It may contain experiences of empirical researchers, practical projects, even teaching methods being deployed around this region, and all with the aim of bringing sustainable development closer to the community from different perspectives. And it is hoped that this will give the participant a wider perspective on these issues. Ladies and gentlemen, it is expected that this webinar will shed a better light on strategies to strengthen the university's contribution to dealing with the effects and impact of climate change through local action plans against climate change in Malaysia and Southeast Asia region. Ladies and gentlemen, it is also hoped through this webinar that the national, regional, and global universities network and knowledge exchange regarding climate change and sustainable development towards the green agenda will be formed and strengthened. As a co-organizer, we in AKEPT, we are proud to drive the knowledge sharing session today with the collaboration with our partner UKM, to be presented by the experts and based on their insights and strategies as universities leaders with their experience and expertise in addressing climate change and sustainable communities issue. We hope that this webinar will be an informative platform for our audience throughout this webinar, the whole day, informative background so that they will be able to understand the impact of higher education on climate change and sustainable development. We would like also to take this opportunity to state our appreciation and congratulations to all parties involved, especially for our partners, our collaborators in UKM, and our distinguished speakers for making this webinar a reality. We hope that this cooperation will continue and harness in the near future so that it can be useful and very impactful on the well-being of the present and future generation. Lastly, ladies and gentlemen, it is a great pleasure it is a great pleasure that we welcome you to this particular webinar and hope that you will be having a very productive learning experience. With that, I bid everyone a good day, and hopefully everyone not only enjoy, but will be benefited from this webinar. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam, Mr. Azrul. Thank you very much for the opening remarks. Okay, next, we're going to start our webinar. So I would like to introduce our moderator for today, Associate Professor Dr. Wan Hana Malini Wan Mohta, only known as Dr. Hana. Dr. Hana is a civil engineer by training and received her education from Malaysia, South Korea, Thailand, and United Kingdom. She likes to challenge herself in conducting multidisciplinary research in water resources management, environmental hydraulic, water and wastewater engineering. She now heads the Environmental Management Center, one of the research wing in Institute of Climate Change, University Kebangsaan Malaysia. Dr. Hana, the screen is yours.
All right, thank you, the charming MC, for the kind introduction. I like that sentence. The screen is now mine. So, Assalamualaikum, selamat pagi, and a very good morning. So, as I've been introduced, my name is Hana, and I will do my best to facilitate our discussion today. Well, I do hope that this will be an engaging, lively discussion with active participation from the audience. Thus, I encourage to those who have any questions, please feel free to drop them in the chat box, and I will coordinate the questions and the panels accordingly. Ladies and gentlemen, the impacts of climate change are already here, despite what others might have think, and it is fast increasing, and there is no silver bullet to prevent them. So we have seen, and in fact are seeing now, a more frequent extreme events of storms, which usually translate into floods, droughts, heat waves, multiple reports of rising sea levels at our coastlines, and the profound video of our glaciers melting. Our main goal is to build resilient communities in the ASEAN in the face of climate security risks. So we want to build a climate resilient society which are reflective. So we have to learn from our historical and past events, robust, forward-thinking, and flexible. To do so, I believe the university and the academia can be the influential drivers in the climate change. There's here with us this morning, we have a set of panels from ASEAN universities with incredible CV and are very much suited to our theme of discussion, that is universities, sustainable communities towards a green agenda. Before we start, I shall introduce and read to you a brief introduction of each panel. I'll start with our own Associate Professor, Dr. Zaini Sakawi. He's the Director of Institute of Climate Change, University Kebangsaan Malaysia. He's an established scientist in environmental and waste management, focusing on order, measurement and analysis, environmental management, physical geography, environmental impact, and social impact assessment. So he is an UKM alumni, received his PhD in 2013, specializing in order measurement and analysis. He's a member of Institute Waste Management United Kingdom since 2001, and also a member of Global Network of Environmental Science and Technology. He was an evaluator for environmental impact assessment, social impact assessment, a community for greenhouse gas, for sisa buangan sector, and also a technical committee for climate change, a very important member in terms of climate change in Malaysia. Well, next we have here Professor Simon Redfern. He's the Dean, College of Science and President's Chair in Earth Sciences, ASEAN School of Environment, Nanyang Technology University, Singapore, our neighbor. So he is an earth scientist exploring the physics and chemistry of our planet and environment. His work within geosciences spans more than 35 years. He left Cambridge in 2019 to move to NTU and take up the post of President's Chair in Earth Sciences alongside the role of Dean of the College of Sciences. He is also the recipient of the European Mineralogical Society's Medal for Research Excellence and Fellow of the Mineralogical Society of America and the Geological Society of London. He's also a member of the UK Ministerial Appointed Committee on Radioactive Waste Management, in charge with providing independent scrutiny of the development of the Geological Radioactive Waste Repository in the UK. Next panelist from Thailand is Associate Professor Dr. Sri Suparatit. He's the Director, Climate Change and Disaster Center from Rangsit University, Pathum Thani. Dr. Sri, I believe I have been to university years ago. He's the Dean. So he was the Dean,
Yes,
College
yeah.
of Engineering, Rangsit University, a General Director at Srindon International Environmental Park, and also a Director General at Provincial Water Works Authority. He received his Doctor of Engineering in Hydraulic and Coastal Engineering from Tohoku University, Japan, and currently he's the leader author of the IPCC. I also would like to highlight that he has been awarded Historical Climate Change, Climate Vulnerability, and Climate Change Projection for Thailand, Indian ASEAN Green Fund for the year 2017 and 2019.
Yeah, thank you.
Now, last but not least, we have here Assistant Professor Dr. Meridian Alam. He is the Assistant Professor of Sociology and Anthropology Department from University Brunei Darussalam, a very close neighbor of Malaysia. He used to be an environmental consultant for biogas project in Indonesia and also consultant for Women and Children Welfare Plan International. His key interest in the area of international comparative education, specifically about the current trend of a global environment education. He attained a Master of Philosophy in Culture, Environment and Sustainability from the University of Oslo before took up the research fellowship at the University of Copenhagen in Denmark, and also have experience in research in Nepal, China, India, and Pakistan during his study. So looking at the panels, ladies and gentlemen, I believe we will have a full flavor of ASEAN dialogue with a little twist of European, discussed within our local context, where the key points, I believe, from our forum will be useful for us to design strategies for a successful climate change adaptation and resilience. So I think before we move on towards the more diverse issues, let us start with the basic and common theme of university, that is education. So as the host, Dr. Zaini, it is customary to start first, then I will get you to get the ball rolling and officially open up our discussion.
Okay, thank you.
No, I haven't given you the
Oh,
question
sorry.
yet. I
Sorry.
believe it's okay. I believe, and I think we believe that the university is a powerful anchor organization in dealing with the effects and impacts of climate change. So in the region of Malaysia and the Southeast Asian countries, What is the university's role contribution in shaping the future generation to be more climate aware? And now the screen is yours.
Okay, thank you, Madam Moderator, Dr. Wanhana, my very close colleagues. Okay, regarding our discussion, I mean, for the first panelist, discuss about the role of the university, the climate change impacts, and toward shaping the future generation. So maybe I give introduction more on the university role, and then what the university done, and then how they involved with the community involvements with programs and others research. So as everybody knows, that university vital hubs of research and teachings in any fields. In this case, environments and climate change is one of the important field and issue that lecturer or top managements of the university always discuss. Okay, I think this is very important as a large organizations. University has a significant emissions which contribute to our climate crisis. University should therefore lead a global actions to limit climate change issue. So university also have the autonomy to make decisions on sustainability and are increasingly doing so individually and collectively. So many universities are basing their efforts on the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, such as sustainability include radically reducing a carbon footprints and climate change as well. UKM as a University Watan, so I'm proud about it. We are UKM as a University Watan. We are very committed on research program related on climate change, either at the faculty or institute based or any science or social science fields. They are very keen involved and committed with programs, activities, and research on climate change and green agenda. So ladies and gentlemen, I bring you all back to the last 30 years when the UKM, starting the Environment and Development Institute, Lestari, was established on the 1st October 1994 as an institute that conduct research and training activities in multidisciplinary field. So what I'm trying to say that the establishment of this Lestari is to fulfill the aspirations of the university inspired during the 1992 United Nations Conference on Environment and Development in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil. So just to realize the goal of sustainable development. Then parallel to that, UKM also introduced a new master's programs related to environment, and then we call it a Masters of Environmental Management. So through these master's programs, UKM actually has produced many experts in fields of environmental management, not only limited to the top managements of the governments, but most importantly, as a lecturer and top management in several other universities in Malaysia, also our nearest neighbor Indonesia. So from Malaysia, like UUM, UPM, UTHM, and UMS. So ladies and gentlemen, because of the high commitment to environmental management also, since the ability of the Faculty of Social Science and Humanities under the geography programs to establish a center of excellence related to GIS and remote sensing. Through the center of excellence, many research related to sea level rise and climate change are studied and tracked through geographical information system and remote sensing image. Also in geography department, through the structures of the new program, courses related to the environments and climate change have been introduced. For example, course on development and environmental management, atmospheric studies, also climate change. I think this is the strong our subjects in our department. So concerned that UKM as a university that strive for research in environmental sustainability continue to be empowered through the establishments of the Institutes of Climate Change. So the establishments of this institute is a concern and a strength of UKM as a fighter in dealing with climate change issue. Many studies related to climate change, especially about sea level rise, the impacts of climate change and its adaptation have been carried out. Not even that, our institute also create a research network at the global levels. For example, we have a link with International Lunar Observatory Association from US. We also have Shanghai University and National Central University Taiwan. We have link with Qatar University, with International Center for Space Weather Science and Education from Japan. And recently we have a good link with United Kingdom Center for Ecology and Hydrology. Last but not least, UKM also got a top-down grant from Ministry of Environment and Water, CASA, to establish a new Center of Excellence. So our KP is here, Dr. Wanhana, which is focused on the environment and climate change, and we call it Environmental Management Center. So EMC is not only a data repository center related to the environments and climate change, but also conduct research on climate change adaptation and mitigation. So apart from that, we also introduce our new master's courses, I think a specifics on climate change, and the only one in Malaysia. So inshallah, coming our next session next semester, we introduce a master's in climate change. I think it's very specific and subject focus. So through this Institute of Climate Change and other centers in UKM and the faculty, UKM punch above the weight with many climate change research group and more IPCC authors than any other Malaysian university. Researchers in social sciences, education, and humanities are also influenced in the study of climate change and its impacts. Many universities have made a start, but they must be more ambitious on climate action leaders. I think this is very important thing that what we try to discuss today. And all the university can and should take meaningful and visible actions. And how the university deal with climate change impacts. So it's come from our research output. We help the governments or related agencies to minimize the impacts. Also, we produce a programs or model related on environment and climate change. We develop how the awareness and how they need to do something on climate change. Also, we produce the community services. We identify the sensitive receptor, educate the community on how to adapt, mitigate, and manage environmental problem. And last, I think the very important thing is the awareness among the community and how the enforcement will be done. So in general way, there are several items that we can handle climate change impact, such as reduce emissions. For example, use car less. Whenever possible, instead use a sustainable transportation, such as a bicycle, or maybe we use a public transportation more often. In the case of long distance travel, also trains are more sustainable than airplanes because a great deal of the carbon dioxide emitted into the atmosphere. Also, if we are into a car, remember that every kilometers that we increase our speed will considerably increase our carbon dioxide emissions and expansion. Second way is about the save of energy. So we need to take a look at the level of our equipments and never leave them on standby. Always adjust the thermostats for heatings and air conditions. By being careful how we use homes equipment, we can save our energy and of course money at the end of the month. Number three, the way how we see the climate change impacts on the community and the future of the generations. So we need to put the 3R of the sustainability into the practice, such as reduce, reuse, and recycle. For example, for reuse, we need to take advantage of a second-hand market to give a new life to items that we don't use anymore and to find something that someone else has gotten rid of that. And we have saving money and reducing our consumptions. And then something related on recycle as well, with packaging, waste from electronics. And then we need to the low carbon as well for the dire result in the smartest consumption. Well, to reduce meat consumptions, like livestock is one of the biggest contaminators of the atmosphere, and increase consumption of fruit and vegetables. And the next is to reduce the impacts to the climate change as far as possible. We try to avoid anything that may be a fire hazard. Also, we plant a tree throughout our life and can absorb up to tons of carbon. The last approach, we need to make a demands from the governments, demand that can take a measure toward a more sustainable life any way that we can. For example, we can promote a renewable energy, a regulatory measures such as a property labeling products, and also we can promote more sustainable public transportations, promote the use of bicycles and other non-polluting transportations in the city for eliminate waste to recycling and reuse. Then lastly, ends of my discussions about the impacts of the community, the population has more power than it realized to demand measures from government to raise a global awareness of the global warming problems. Then before I end my discussions, we need to think globally, act locally. Your action are needed in the fight against climate change. Okay, Dr. Anna, I leave it to you again.
All right, thank you.
Yeah.
I concur with you that the population and community plays an important role.
Yes.
I am quite interested in one of your points. I think it means that UKM is aggressive in addressing the issues of climate change by starting to offering new master program. So Prof. Simon, in one of the Architects Climate Action Network surveys, I think in 2019, almost 80% of the students responded that their courses were not preparing them for future work in the world of climate change. So how do we as academics can tailor our courses and program in addressing the question of climate change without jeopardizing the necessary technical content? So what do you think?
That's a very good question, Dr. Hannah. Thank you very much. And thank you everybody for inviting me along today. I'm delighted to be here. Also delighted that there's so many attendees, so many people interested in this topic, because clearly this is one of, if not the major topic that faces us all in terms of our existence on this planet. You know, the limitations that we have in terms of resources and the finite limits on expansion of society and growth. The topic, I think the interesting point that you are making from this survey, that 80% of students felt they weren't being prepared, is an indicator of the interest in the next generation in this topic in particular. I mean, I speak as someone who's coming towards, you know, the latter stages of my scientific career, but we see as in universities, of course, every year a new intake of undergraduates, each of whom is very highly invested in their future and in the future of the planet. So it's unsurprising, I think, that the generations of undergraduate students in particular are very keen to find solutions. And it reminds me of something that the former president of the American Geophysical Union said in an address. This is Professor Marcia McNutt, who actually is now the president of the National Academy of Sciences in the US. And she gave a talk at the American Geophysical Union meeting in which she pointed out that in science in particular, too often we focus on the problems, and understanding the problems, of course, is very important. So all of us who work in earth and environmental sciences, in climate change and climate science, are focused on trying to understand the problem. And very often we focus on the problem, and the problem itself is very complicated. So understanding projections of climate change into the future is a big challenge, because the Earth system is such a complex system and such a system of feedbacks. And we really are still struggling to get an accurate understanding of exactly what's going on. And that's the first step in finding solutions. But Professor McNutt pointed out that if you go to the doctor, suppose you go to the doctor and you say, "Doctor, I've been doing a lot of running recently and my leg is hurting." And the doctor says, "Oh yes, you've got a stress fracture, go away." Yeah, you wouldn't think much of your doctor. You want to go to, when you go to the doctor, you don't just want a diagnosis, you want a solution. And similarly in universities, too often we get focused on the problem without thinking about the solution. So coming back to your question, I think what we need to do in our education is not simply focusing on climate change and environment, but also on adaptation, mitigation, and solutions. And in particular, in the ASEAN region, we've already heard mentioned several times the challenges of problems such as sea level rise, compound flooding, extreme heat, changes in actually the way pathogens operate across the region, you know, zoonotic diseases, the interaction between health and climate and sustainability. And so there's a whole range of problems. One of the approaches that we've taken here in NTU Singapore is we've actually changed our curriculum, our undergraduate curriculum, in the last year. And although a technological university, we're also a comprehensive university. So we have a school of social sciences, arts, humanities, business, medicine, education. And we're now bringing together all of our undergraduates in the first 3 semesters of their education to look at major challenges. And so we have something called an interdisciplinary common curriculum. It's really operating for the first time in the area of sustainability in the last couple of months. And in this curriculum, we bring together first year and second year students from all various disciplines and deliberately mix them up. So we have historians sitting next to mechanical engineers, sitting next to mathematicians, sitting next to people from the business school, thinking about solutions to these problems, to get the students themselves to start to generate their own thoughts and guide them, of course, and discuss these issues. And that's working very well, because many of the solutions to the problems that we face will depend upon multidisciplinary teams. So action by multidisciplinary teams. And so starting students off early in their career, in their educational career, such that they can communicate to each other, so that the climate scientist can communicate to the psychologist, can communicate to the mathematician, communicate to the educator, and find their own ways of addressing these problems. I think that's one way that we're approaching this need that the students feel for their curriculum to be relevant. So hopefully that's addressed a little your question.
Yes. So was it a project, or was it, a completely restructuring academic structure, the one that you were saying about, an integrated disciplinary curriculum? It's
actually taken 3 or 4 years to come about, because it has been a complete restructuring of part of the curriculum. And you can imagine when you tell professors that we're going to spend some of the teaching time on an interdisciplinary course, yes, and we're going to take away the amount of time that you have to teach your core discipline. Exactly. The first reaction you get, of course, is no, we need this time. But actually, when we talked with our graduates' employers, one of the pieces of feedback we got was that our employers, our stakeholders effectively at the university, were keen that our graduates were better at communicating. And so this is one route that we saw to actually improving communication skills as well. So it's also a method for improving the holistic education of our graduates.
So how did the management, went about and, asked the lecturer to follow the interdisciplinary curriculum, and, how do you strike a balance between the necessity of the technical content, the necessary, and also, the importance of interdisciplinary issues?
Well, I think in this case, first of all, it's aligned with our research strategy for the university. So our research strategy is focused on a few common strategic goals, and one of them is sustainability. Clearly, this is a problem globally, and if you look at any leading university globally, sustainability is going to be on the agenda. Another, I'll give you some other examples. Another is Industry 4.0, technology and humanity, healthy aging. So these are all problems that are affecting developed societies, and they're part of our strategy. So first of all, sustainability and climate is part of our strategy. And as Associate Professor Sakawi has said, this is something that has to be pervasive throughout the university, not only in the way we teach, but in the way we behave. And we have to be leaders in our practice of sustainability as well. So in a way, getting faculty, getting academics on board, you need a few cheerleaders. So the way we did it, we had the cheerleaders who saw the importance of it. And of course, with the management of the university also keen for this to happen, and the Ministry of Education seeing the need for it, then we were able to make it happen. Yeah.
All right, great. Cheerleaders, well, taking from your points there, I think to have an interdisciplinary curriculum is also a way forward. And another thing is that we must have that active engagement with the society. So Dr. Meridian, so I trust that you must have engaged with community in your line of work as environmental educationist.
Yes,
so how do you think students working with grassroots community projects can help accelerate university contribution and action towards the climate change and green agenda? What is your opinion on varsity students as the agent of change?
Yeah, I guess the university students are also facilitator for creating collaborative learning with the university-based, not only scholars, lecturers, and professors, but also engage with the non-government organizations and also the government officials, and also the leaders of the indigenous people here. For example, in Brunei Darussalam, we have five Pua, and then these students are also collecting data through the interview with these local leaders. That's number one. And then number two, the university students are also engaged in a different ways of mapping out and identifying efforts, the actors who can be engaged in the solving and environmental sustainability problems, and also how they can establish these collaborative actions together through their work-based project. And then number three, here in the Faculty of Arts and Social Science, for example, we do have modules that are taken by the students who are from the Faculty of Science and Faculty of Health Science, and even not only geography, but also sociology and anthropology, such as the module of the introductions to environmental problems and environmental sustainability, where in one semester, the student must create like problem-based projects, and according to the several themes under their own interests. For example, one student can take a food resilience project, where in one semester they have to do interview with a community who are experiencing sort of like food supply problems in the community, and then the students should also collect some data on what's kind of possible solutions and alternative that they can work with the community leaders and also the members. And number two, about the work-based project that they can take on the energy and renewable energy resilience. They are allowed to interview some of the renewable energy engineers and also renewable energy suppliers, not only in Bandar Seri Begawan, but they can also outreach some of the renewable energy engineers who are based in Syria, for example, and then they presented their works in front of the upper secondary school students, sixth form students and even the headmasters in some of the local school here in Brunei Darussalam. And then number 3 is on the waste management project. So throughout semester, these students must create like a project on the recycle, reusable, and how to create sustainable organic waste management by involving the local communities. So these 3 themes were enabling them to get exposed to more issues of the climate change and how their works are actually part of the mitigation strategy that we can work together. And why I love working with the students, because of course they are the leaders of tomorrow. And then second of all, in another module such as the environmental sociology, which I commonly teach every semester. And in the next semester, we will be inviting a lot of guest speakers across Southeast Asians who are working as environmental analysts, environmental activists, social workers who are also working with the local communities who are affected and under the impacts of the climate change. They share their ideas on what are their current feasible actions to work with the community leaders, and what are the feasible actions that the students as the scholars of future and also the university that can work with other stakeholders. And also, since my concern is on the environmental educations, and now I'm holding a position as the Faculty of Arts and Social Science seminar. And here, in the past, we have been involving several ambassadors from Southeast Asian countries and European countries to share their involvement in the IPCC meeting in the previous countries they were involved in. And then number 2, in the last 4 years, there has been an increase of the presentations topics that highlight the climate change issue and mitigations, not only in Brunei but Darussalam, but also in Southeast Asian countries. And these presentations are also connecting the themes with the global issues of the environmental sustainability, about the green capitalism, and so on and so forth. And it was attended by the lecturers, professors across disciplines from the different faculties, which is very fascinating. And also, we should, on the different note, we have seen increased number of the MA and PhD study topics that highlight the climate change mitigations, about the thrift shops, and also the growing number of the environmental NGO, where the majority of the members are young people here in Brunei and Southeast Asia. And also, instead of that, here since 2021, there was a what we call as a Brunei mid-year conference exhibitions, and the key topic was really fascinating, such as the inclusive resilience and sustainable economic growth, where the climate change and also the sustainability have been part of the core issues. And one of the guest speaker was the David Stellenbosch, one of the anchor of the National Geography. You know, he's quite famous. And we were also inviting some of the international outstanding scholars in the field of the climate change mitigations. And so, in a nutshell, the university is no longer a ivory tower. Yeah. So because we were now engaging with the multiple stakeholders who are also engaged in the different projects, and also the sustainability issues are not only responsibility of the professors, but also the community leaders, the NGO or the civic organizations, and so and other independent community members who are also undertaking their autonomous mitigations initiative that they can do according to their roles. So in nutshell, in the sociological perspective, we are now actually utilizing what we call and mobilizing what we call as the social capital of climate change mitigations, where we also engage with the those who are holding the very important social networks, but also we are also embracing what we call as the cultural capital, such as, for example, here, the cultural capital can be also the indigenous community values, the religious values or spiritual values, and the involvement of the social institutions. Like here in Brunei, we do have what we call as a ketua kampung, right? So when it's come to the questions to what the university can do in working with the local, with the grassroots people. So me as a sociologist, for example, I regularly visit the Ketua Kampung, and we have an informal talk about what's happening in the last 6 months or in the last two years in regards to the climate change induced disaster. For example, what happens? Is there any landslide in your community, for example? What about the floods? And what about the other issues like flash floods, for example? And then what the community leaders along the members have done in handling and coping with such unprecedented disasters. And from there, actually, I can gather different type of solutions which I, as a scholar, cannot do or undertake under my research. So this is sort of like a brand new knowledge for me as a sociologist and social science in general, and including their views and opinions in our policy brief, in our curriculum, and right now we have also emphasized the different type of opinions of the community leaders in our curriculum. So we use the approach, what we call as the AMIC approach. So the AMIC approach is an approach where we can get from the local community, the local leaders, the religious leaders, understanding on the different type of the climate change events, for example. And also, instead of that, in terms of the social institutions, here in Brunei, during the Friday sermons or the Kubah or the Khutbah Jumat, right? We call it.
Yes.
The Islamic leaders or the ustads regularly remind the citizens about the potential impacts of the climate change. For example, what methods we can do to prevent the flash floods. So mitigation strategies are not solely discussed in the scientific papers, but also we are circulating the issues in a more grassroots levels, and we engage with the different leaders to work with this kind of issue. So we make the climate change mitigations more grounded, more accessible, more culturally inclusive. So it's not merely for the university professor, for the climate change scholars, but this is for all stakeholders in our country. Yeah. Okay. And yeah, so regularly the University Brunei Darussalam also hold like the tree planting. And last year there was a tree planting effort involving the Institute of the Biodiversity Research of UBD and Singapore MIT Alliance for Research and Technology, SMART, and Brunei Forestry Department, Brunei Shell Petroleum, and Wetland Internationals to initiate the first scientific and community engagement forest rehabilitations project on one of the largest peat swamp forest reserve here in Brunei. and also the Botanic Garden Conservations International, or BGCI, and the UBD have secured externally funded projects under the BGCI and National Geographic Society, focusing on the conservations of the endangered diptocarp species who were also potentially impacted by the climate change events, and also other projects recently awarded for collection of samples for the genomic research. And right now, we are also exploring the sun bear's livelihood here in Brunei, and also the potential climate change impact on their food, and also their natural ecosystem. And it's about the baseline study. And so this is very interesting research, because the genomic applications is also involved in the study. And there is also a genomic application workshop in UBD that was delivered by the visiting researcher from the Sing Health Duke in Club and National University of Singapore Institute of Biodiversity Medicine. So that's my highlights on what we have done so far with the communities, and also with the intellectual community members. Thank you.
Looks like there's a lot of activities have been done by the community and also the UBD. We have a lot of questions coming in relating to universities' collaboration, contribution, and how can we restructure our academic structure. But before that, I would like to wrap up the first round by asking Dr. Sri Suparatid, taking from Dr. Meridian's key points just now. One of it that I quite like is that I think the way forward is to address the local leaders. And Ketua Kampung I know is very, very powerful. They do. And taking from also your example of climate change, that is flash flood, I was informed that Dr. Sri here is an expert in disaster management and is very familiar with the flood himself. I was informed that Rangsit University are frequently and heavily affected by it, if I'm not mistaken. So how do you use your knowledge and your voice, Dr. Sri, to educate the public on the awareness of climate change, particularly, to translate the technicality of the climate change into layman terms so that the community would understand?
Yeah, thank you very much, Dr. Wanhana. Yeah, I'm very sorry that I cannot use the Zoom background. I cannot adjust. Yeah, because I use very old version of notebook. Okay.
The frame background is very beautiful.
Yeah, since Dr. Wanhana says that we are now under suffering from flood in the 10-year return period flood now. Yeah, every part of Thailand almost flood now. Okay, so of course, as Dr. Wanhana says that last 10 years we have a very big flood. I mean, I can call that the great flood in Thailand, 2011, right? Yeah, at that time, the World Bank's estimate economic damage, if I remember, 1.4 trillion baht. Yeah, at that time. Since lesson learned from previous are not still being solved for this coming flood. Two challenging issues are that there is no unique flood information from the governments. As you saw, because of most of the communities are flooded, cannot receive a complete or unique information. Therefore, many people try to get them from the online social networks. As you know that the social network, is it true or false information? They don't know. They are not believed to the government information now. The situation is like this now. So the second issue deals with the unequal threat from the governments between the rich and poor. Or we can say that, of course, the government tried to protect only the economic zones area, without considering the most vulnerable flood affected communities. There are no plans for them. Therefore, we can see many colons in many flood areas now. Okay. So academic or flood expert in the university can play a very important role in these short-term issues. As I mentioned, on both sides, government side and flood affects community side, cannot deny scientific information. Right? We try to simplify those complicated scientific data, making infographics for the media. The media have experience on this issue and disseminated by social networks such as Facebook, radio, or TV channels in a right time and a right place. Yeah, this is short-term issue we are now doing. So. But for long-term threat, as we know very well, right? Also, Professor Simon also mentions, Dr. Simon also mentions, key outputs from the IPCC and outcome from the COP26 in August and October last year, climate and humidity correlate are already occurred. See, widespread, rapid, and intensified are three keywords from IPCC. The outcome of COP26 does not give very good hope for world societies. Yeah. Mr. Chairman, says Dr. Alok Sharma speech, we are not win or lose, or if it's win is a very fragile win, and the powers to fulfill Paris Agreement is very weak. Yeah, this give the world society not a good hope for that issue. Therefore, we can expect that how we can alleviate this problem, or we can transfer this issue to the society. Threats from climate-related events become more frequent and more severe in most parts of the world, especially Southeast Asia, as Dr. Wanhana speaks. Okay, so in Thailand, this topic is very slow rising. You know, even the term sustainability is a new term for society. Yeah, this is very abstract. Yeah, what is the sustainability? It may be similar to other countries. It is normally for politicians and policymakers and also people to think about their short-term benefits, daily, monthly, yearly. So long-term benefits from climate change, making them awareness is really difficult and challenging. Yeah. So what we are continuing doing is try to raise the climate change awareness through community networks. We have very strong community networks, but try to enhance them to aware this issue, especially adaptation issue, as Professor Simons says. But in terms of mitigation issues, as you know, more than 80% small and medium enterprise are still no plan to go for net zero or half emissions. This is, of course, the main obstacle or the main barrier for them are both climate change knowledge and also limited financial support. I think in Thailand, there's still a long way to go. Yeah. So that is my first comments to you. And
all right.
Okay. Thank
all
you.
Right, thank you, Dr. Sri. I think you have touched a little bit there in terms of the effective contribution from the government. You know, perhaps some government can give some incentive to boost up, especially the small medium enterprises to, you know, gear towards the climate change changes in terms of their lifestyle and business operation. Okay, but before we move on towards that, I think that is a very interesting issue that we can speak on. I would like us to cover up some of the questions given by the panels. So the first round that we have covered some inputs in terms of the perspective from the university management, from Dr. Zaini and also from Prof. Simon, in terms of community engagement from Dr. Meridian, and also from Dr. Sri, in terms how can we, you know, transfer knowledge to the community effectively through what you have said before, infographic and through social media platforms. Right. So we have here from Christine Charmin San Jose. So I think not only UKM and UBD and NTU and also Thailand universities are geared toward the climate change. I'm not so sure where you're from, Mrs. Christine, but she said now they have included climate change and disaster risk management subject to all courses in her university for both undergraduate and postgraduate students. So she herself is one of the instructor of the subject, and part of the students' activity is to create short video clips, create digital poster to be posted on social media for information dissemination. So I think we are utilizing and manipulating the social platform. I think video clips is very useful for the young generation these days, especially on TikTok. I think 10 to 20 minutes video is very, very powerful information tools to convey the message. And we also have another question from Ahmad Razi Othman. I know this person. So his question is, I think, can I have Prof. Simon to answer this? What is the best tool or module for us to develop in assessing climate change, based on NTU experience?
That's a good question. The assessment of climate change, I like both of these questions because in a way, I think getting the students to engage in this, and actually the students will engage. We have a group within NTU called EarthLink, which has students from all faculties involved, where it's student-led projects. For example, tree planting. Tree planting has been mentioned a number of times, but drawing carbon down from the atmosphere back into the earth is one of the challenges that we have. And of course, doing that through biology is a very good route. The best tool or module to develop an assessment of climate change. Well, of course, I'm biased because I'm an earth scientist. So, I can talk to you about paleoclimate and understanding how climate has influenced the planet over the lifetime of the earth, which is one perspective. So I think one of the things about taking a multidisciplinary approach to this is that you get different people's perspectives on the problem. And so, for example, one of the perspectives that one has as a geoscientist is that you think about processes that have gone on for a very long time. And the challenge that we have today is that the Earth is changing far more rapidly than it would do otherwise, naturally. And so that perspective is an important perspective because it tells us that the normal processes that we have for feedbacks on the planet don't operate on the timescales that we are changing the system. So that's a kind of systems approach. And I think a lot of the approaches for understanding climate are systems approaches. And actually the people who are possibly better at this than scientists are engineers. Engineers often look at a system to try and understand a process. Also, of course, social scientists. So I'm coming back to this theme that I think we do have to bring together people from different disciplines to look at this problem in a holistic way. And actually not simply to look at the problem, but to come up with potential solutions and to encourage it at a range of levels. So one of the challenges, I think, that we all have with climate change is sometimes it just looks like such a big problem that we can't address it. And maybe we've had some of this comment actually in some of the questions. My local government isn't doing anything. The university isn't doing anything. The local community isn't doing anything. But actually, very often this inaction is a consequence of really not knowing where to start. And the problem is that we have a challenge that faces us that we have to address at an individual level, so personal behavior. We have to challenge at a community level and governmental level, and also corporate level, so that corporations and businesses have a responsibility, governments and governing bodies have a responsibility, and individuals have a responsibility. So that's also a challenging problem, because we can always lay the blame with somebody else. You can.
It's easy to do
place. Yeah, and that's not going to solve the problem. So, Ahmed Osman, I haven't really answered your question. What's the best? I think it would be arrogant of me to suggest one best tool, because I think we have to use all tools available. Yeah, that's going to have a say.
Okay. Well, thank you there, Prof. Simon. So I think one of the keywords that the Dr. Ahmad Razi stressed here is the education readiness. So can I have Dr. Zaini to give a quick input on education readiness in terms of UKM, because you have mentioned before that UKM is offering a new master program in climate change. So how do you see the education readiness here in Malaysia?
Okay, thank you, Dr. Anna. Okay, actually, I'm quite interested with the question that from Mr. Ahmad Razi Osman, related on education readiness in preparing our next generation. So as I mentioned before, not even in UKM, I think in the other university as well. So we are very strong actually in any research or any syllabus related on environments and climate change. So we done already our part actually. So we done a lot of research on, we prove that what the impacts of the climate change and any things happen. Now, the important key, I think we need to, how to engage the community or the young generation to mitigate and to adapt with the situation. That is very important. And then I think in Malaysia, in our syllabus, they have a lax with the syllabus in the secondary and primary school, because we didn't have a specific textbooks. We discussed on specifics on environmental management, climate change. So what we have, we are quite common in just a textbook on science. We discuss on physics, chemistry. So I think this is not quite enough. So I think this is the right time. So we in the right track actually, because our government under Ministry of Environmental and Water, they are very concerned about issue related on the climate change. So I think this is the right. We need to collaborate with the Ministry of Education, so to produce a good syllabus from the beginning. I mean, not even we just give a theory education, something like that. So need to involve them to go to the field, try to identify, show them what is the impacts of these kinds of heights of temperatures and the others meteorology component. So and I think from that one they can they have idea from them, and then we need to ask them to show how to mitigate if this something happen with these kinds of disaster and so on. So I think that is very important, Dr. Hannah.
Okay, right. Thank you, Dr. Zaini. I think I quite agree with you that the education has to be spanned across the community, all levels of the community in ourselves. So Dr. Meridian and Dr. Sri, I have one question for you. So one of the suggestions, taking from both Prof. Simon and Dr. Zaini's input. So one of the suggestions for a climate resilient community is to diversify the student intake. So we have restructured curriculum for climate change. But I think we also have to diversify the student intake, because the climate change not only for the young generation, but also for us and older generation. So we have to have strategies to support local adults by offering climate change courses to them, in particular to the less fortunate when they were so young. So means they were young, they will not have the same opportunity like us. So that these adults can have the opportunity to rethink and reimagine the nature of the work, and not to wait until this new generation to come in. So what do you think of this particular suggestion in terms of your opinion, and also UBD approach, and also Rangsit University later? So I'll start with Dr. Meridian.
Yeah, thank you for the information. And I think this is very fantastic effort from the UKM as well. So I think this kind of very specific course made and created and served for the local communities who were for example, they are low income, it can be created as a optional module where the community can get a discount, and then for example, they can use this kind of the certificate upon completion of this course as the CPD, continuing development professional, as a continuing professional development, CPD, right? Okay. So,
Yes.
and then they can also use this kind of certificate to apply for job, to apply for any kind of government positions if there is a vacancy. So I think we need to create sort of much wider opportunity for this advantage of community members, and then they can use this kind of opportunity to level up their skills, but also to reach out the better social welfare in the country. And also in terms of the environmental education's curriculum, what is the best way to introduce the climate change in our education? In response to the previous question, actually, I'm a bit interested in that question as well.
Okay,
So
go ahead.
yes, it is actually reminding me of when I did my MPhil in the University of Oslo, where as a sociologist, I was actually back then I was taking a module called the climate change. It's the module simple. It's just like climate change module. And as a social science, in the first place, I was imagining that this module will talk about the geology, about the stone, about the impacts of the flash flood and things. But when I embarked on the module, so I found it is much more interesting and much more fascinating and systematic than I imagined. So for example, the module consists of the 14 lectures, all right? And then in the first 3 lectures, the focus is on the scientific and also like biological, chemical, and also non-social science debates on the climate change, like what we call as the more technical issues of the climate change. We learn more about the sea level rise, how to calculate the carbon footprints, how we can identify where the heavy rainfalls will cause the flash floods in the regions. And also we were also introduced to the calculations of, instead of the footprint, but also the carbon emissions. And we were also introduced the different type of the green gas house emissions, not only the carbon, but also other type of gases, and what makes the communities more vulnerable to these cases, and then what the impacts of each gas on Earth, and also on the community in the global south, in the north, in the north, and so on. So that's the first 3 lectures. And then in the next 5 lectures, we were discussing a lot more about the impact of the climate change, and also what's kind of the mitigations. The mitigation refer here as the way we can do to reduce the impact of the climate change itself. And then so it is divided, the lectures were divided into like 2 themes. Number 1 is the local mitigations and the global mitigations. And also in terms of the global mitigations, what the global political structures now that have been contributing to the climate change impact. For example, the developments of carbon-based factories in some of the countries in the Europe, in America, in China, and so on. And also what happens to this kind of North countries developments, and what's the impact on the ones who are living in the south, in the developing countries, not only in the Southeast Asia, but also for example, in the South America, in Africa, in sub-Saharan Africa, and also what are the impacts on the gender, about the food supply, about the microclimates in those areas or regions, and also the local mitigations. In the third part of the lectures, we were introduced to what we call as the adaptations, how we can adapt as a community members, as a civic members, how we can deal and cope with those kind of the impacts. And we can use like the local adaptations and also the global adaptations. For example, in the local adaptations, we were also introduced what's kind of stakeholders that we can work together, like government, community members, community leaders, for example, the different civil society organizations, and also the gender organizations, or and also social institution. Is there any religions? Is there any religious communities or organization? Is there any spiritual any spiritual community members over there? Are there any sort of like regular community gatherings that involve the members of the communities and also the public? And also, we by the end of the session, I think in the last 2 sessions, we were also asked to create like a real project as a, so we imagine ourselves as a NGO person, and also other students were grouped as local community members. So they play role as the ones who were impacted by the climate change. And then we were actually we were actually asked to debate and make like sort of like community meetings. Hey, you are the NGO person, and then you are the community members. And on the other side, there is like a group of students who played role as the university as a scholars. And then we were actually split into 3 groups, several groups, but then each of group consists of these stakeholders. So that's how it works. So right now, when I teach the environmental problems and also the environmental environmental problem and introductions to the environment, I feel like I'm so lucky having such systematic knowledge, according to the Professor Simon terms, about what we can do as a whole, what we can offer to the community as a holistic solutions to this climate change issue. However, I'm not allowed to teach the climate change in a technical terms because my background is in the sociology, unfortunately. Yeah, so that's my sharing anyway.
Well, we will leave this technical terms to Dr. Zaini, Prof. Simon. Yeah. Okay, Dr. Sri, I have another question for you. I think we are moving now slowly from the university's contribution. Now we're going to discuss about the community and also the role of the government. But before that, can I give you 1 minute to discuss about the Rangsit University in terms of the program structure?
Hello?
Yes, please go ahead. Yeah, 1 minute, and then I'll ask you next question.
Okay. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, actually, I also have one question on that. I don't know that it is similar to my country, Thailand, that students who study climate change or who graduate and choose their major course such as climate change, in Thailand may not get job. I don't know. Yeah, this one. Yeah, because you know, if you choose the of course the basis course such as engineering, something like that, you can get job. But or this guy take climate change. But what is climate change? Yeah, even though in government jobs also you cannot get. Maybe this is one. I don't know why. That's why I ask you that. Yeah, as one thing that we have strong community network, as you mentioned, but we still have gap between them and the policy maker. You know, on the communities, peoples, they have very little voice for the decision making. Yeah, for any kinds of projects in their local areas. Right. Yeah, at this time, from my opinion, that local leader, such as the governor, should be elected by the people. This is really a little politics. But we have to go. Otherwise, you cannot fulfill this kind of climate change adaptations at all. Yeah, that is my idea, like my opinion. Yeah.
All right. Or
Yeah.
perhaps they have to take the mandatory course of climate change if should they want to become a minister.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. You're
Prof.
right.
Simon, would you like to have some opinion on that? Because what is the perspective of work job? Should we heavily emphasize on the climate change rather than the technical content in a program?
Yeah, I think I can see how maybe the job opportunities for someone with a degree badged as climate change may be more limited, but the area that we're really dealing with is sustainability, and sustainability is something that businesses and governments, I think the ones that are forward thinking, are all concerned about. And we find, or I have found, that in particular in the area of climate risk, there are opportunities. So commercial organizations need to understand for their planning purposes climate risks. Before I moved to Singapore, I was involved in a graduate program that was entitled Applications of AI, Artificial Intelligence, to Climate Risk. And we had a huge amount of interest from commercial organizations, supermarket chains, hedge fund managers, industry, energy companies. You could even imagine someone who wants to build a warehouse, a distribution system. They need to know, is this an area that's going to flood? How is this area going to change in the next 10, 20 years? And so climate projection is very important for understanding commercial operations. And in agricultural production, how is it going to change as climate changes? Are we going to have water available for our paddy fields? There was a question in the chat about irrigation. So I think it's a question of maybe the way we badge our courses, the way we
publicize.
Yeah, so that the stakeholders, the employers, understand what the value is in the degree programs that we offer. Yeah.
All right, thank you, Prof. Simon. Right, sticking to you, Dr. Sri, I think we are now moving from the university scenario to the community. I think there's one question here given by Mr. Ronald Binati, I think fits to the transition that we are going to. So he's saying, good morning. So the local government do not seem to care on the effect of climate change, and it feels like the university is working on climate change, working in silo. So is it because there is no incentives given to local communities, or is it more of a question between livelihood of people and economic needs? Therefore, climate change effort takes a backseat. So can we have Dr. Sri, your opinion on this?
Yeah, I am very agree on this. Yeah, as I mentioned that just good practice from, of course, developed countries, right? They are almost elected by the people, local governments, right? So that means if you during the 2 or 4 years in your position, if you cannot keep in touch with the people, or you did not do a good work for them, especially for climate related threat for them, so the next 4 years or next 2 years you cannot be elected again, right? So that's why it's very important to work in it very close with the people. I agree with Professor Simon that not just only climate change topic, but in a multidisciplinary. Yeah, I agree that the student who know the scientific the computer programs such as AI, as you mentioned, right? MATLAB or Python, they can get very good job because they can apply in many discipline areas, right? They can get. But the student who just take the course of climate change science is just the very pure knowledge. Maybe they cannot get a good job. That's my opinion. Yeah.
Right. Okay. Thank you, Dr. Sri. I think since we are talking about the communities, incentives is one thing, and I think another one is also about the cultural difference. Dr. Zaini, I think when we talk, sorry, when we talk about community and climate change, there are two questions imposed, as Professor Simon has said before. It's about how can we mitigate and how can we adapt. Those two are the key words: adaptation and also mitigation. So being as community is one of the crucial players. So, but in your opinion, can community-based adaptation increase climate resilience? So although the ASEAN culture can be said similar, Brunei, Singapore, Thailand, and Malaysia, more or less, we can say that have a similar culture, but will the different parts of the culture play an important role in ensuring that the engagement and also the awareness of the climate change? Yeah. Zaini? Are you on mute?
It's a tough question actually to answer this one, because it should be something that we need to involve with the others Asian countries. So we need to involve with the culture, and then
Yeah, we do have the other
we know about how the cultures. But one more thing that I'm sure that different culture, our aim is only one, toward to the end to conserve the environment. Okay, and then how to see the adaptation and the mitigations of the climate change itself. So I'm sure about this one. Even from Indonesia, from Brunei, from Philippines or from Thailand, they have a different culture, but only one of our aim is how to reduce the impacts of climate change to the community. Okay, so the role of the community in the involvement of environmental, that everybody knows that facing a climate change is very important. I think the community, how they involve and how they respond, they communicate with the higher organization, I think is very important. Because toward to the ends, my experience, even though if we have a good acts or any guideline related on climate change or anything in environmental management to make it a more better, more systematic, but when it comes to the community, they have no involvement, they have no enforcement, it's become late. So I think it's nothing like something we didn't do something that very useful for them. Okay, so, in general, that's community for me is a most sensitive receptor that receive the effects of climate change on anything related on environments. So even if there are good acts or any guidelines on environmental management and how to deal with the climate change, without community awareness and involvement, the problem related to climate change cannot be solved. So from this one of the most important steps to tackle climate change problem is to force the global community to adopt a sustainable or environmental friendly way of life. I think this is quite important, because when you have the principles and then how to manage the environment, so I think it's become a way of life for everybody. Okay, and then apart from that ones, technological changes to new innovations that are more environmental friendly need to be implemented to replace existing technological approach to reduce greenhouse gas pollution. I think this is part the community should to involve. As everybody knows, that from the IPCC recommends several approach, including reducing carbon dioxide emission by 45% by the year 2030. So it's also very individual and encouraged to work to use a bicycle as well as to reducing the air travel for business, communicating via video conferencing, reducing plastic use and planning for more trees. So as I mentioned, always indigenous peoples are communities that have a sustainable use and protected forests and other natural resources in ancient time. So either is from Malaysia, from Indonesia, or from Thailand, I think they have the same thought. Okay, so the natural knowledge about environmental conservation can be strengthened through awareness and education campaign. although the local culture related to environmental management between Asian countries may differ, but effort to minimize the impacts of development and explore on the environmental remain still same. That is my opinion. Okay, so climate change is a human cause and avoidable, and its solution require a holistic approach and action. So in this case, there are several approaches to make community involvement successful, increase the climate resilience. So there are several approaches to involve the community. The first thing, I think, become a citizen as a scientist. So according to the National Phenology Networks, phenology is a nature calendars. For example, when the cherry tree blooms, when a robin builds its nest, the leaf turn color in the fall. So the changes in the phenological event are among the most sensitive biological responses to climate change. So how plants and animals respond to climate can help us predict whether their population will grow or shrink. So making the phenology as a leading indicator of climate change impacts. In the second item, we need to talk others about climate change. The communication concern about climate change is a crucial for motivation collective action. We or the community are also experience climate change impacts in their daily life, and they can all talk about the issue, sharing story of why community care about climate change, how is it effective they're doing to advance solution, and be a powerful way to inspire concern and actions in the other's way. And the third one is how to organize. So this one is to address the climate change. The community need to work together. We all live and work in various community and can organize our friends, family, and co-workers to tackle climate change together. The more people involved in climate solution, the more our impact can multiply. So whether it's starting a green group at school, volunteering for a local non-profit, planning a community events, or we can join a local authority programs. And then the last one, I think this is quite tough, take a political actions. So we need to show up and make community voice heard for climate solutions. Our decision maker influence and implements the policies that guide our society. In order to institutionalize the climate-friendly policies, community also need to make sure they heard from the constitutions about the urgency of climate change and the need for climate actions. There are several ways actually how the community can communicate their concerns about climate change to the politicals. So first, maybe it's my thought, be a climate voters. So only vote for the candidate who accept the science of climate change and are committed to addressing the issue. And the second one is sign a petition calling for climate actions. And the third one is maybe we can write a letter to the local, states or national elected official explaining the community concerns about the climate change and force them to act. So all of that discussion and facts mentioned the main point actually, and how the role of the community is very important in improving the climate resilience. So regardless of the cultural differences between Asian countries, the approach used is appropriate to the local environment and the culture. Community can still improve climate resilience with their respective ethics and belief. So I'm sure quite believe with this one. Okay, thank you, Dr. Hana.
All right, thank you, Dr. Zaini. Yes, Prof. Simon, I can see that you're raising your hands. Do you have anything to say there?
Yeah, I just wanted to pick up on what Dr. Zakawi was saying there, with an observation that I made during the pandemic. So I arrived in Singapore in 2019, and of course 6 months later I was stuck here along with everybody else in the country. And one of the interesting things I think that has happened in Singapore, as you were talking about local cultural impacts, has been that the Singaporean population has begun to appreciate the environment more, because they've gone walking in the national parks at the weekend, you know, rather than traveling somewhere else, and begun to appreciate their backyard. And so that I think part of the requirement for community involvement in understanding climate and sustainability is understanding the environment in the first place. And so Dr. Sakawi was pointing this out, in terms of really appreciating what we have, because unless we appreciate what we have, being concerned about preserving it or at least protecting it is going to be difficult. And so I think there has been in Singapore certainly a raised awareness of the environment. And one of the things in your little video that you had at the beginning that I noted down actually was this Keelim Geoforest Park. So the involvement of students, for example, in engaging in the environment directly is important. And I notice I teach in earth sciences, we teach field courses. We go out and look at the environment, and our students are much more engaged, I think, as a result. So having this link to natural capital, to the environment that we want to preserve is also important, I think.
Right. Right. Thank you there, Prof. How about you, Dr. Meridian? Would you think that, cultural differences will make any difference?
Yeah, I do think the cultural differences across the ethnicity, races, and also even the subcultures in the are also making differences in tackling the climate change and also in regards to the mitigations and adaptation things. But there are actually three key things that we as a sociologist and also interdisciplinary scientists can do with the community. There are what we call as the identifying the cultural capital. So there are three things that we can work on it. Number one is we can identify through what we call as the embodied capital. So embodied capital here, embodied cultural capital here is the knowledge, information that are available in the local community. For example, last time I attended international conference in Zimbabwe, and then there are a lot of our colleagues from Africa taught me a very interesting story, such as when a very indigenous or local bees reach a certain altitude on the air, it means there the heavy rains will comes in. So this is one of the local knowledge and informations that to some extent it could be neglected by by us as a scholar or climate change scientist. And that's number one. And then number two is on what we call as the objectified cultural capital. So objectified cultural capital here refers to objects that they can do to help their daily life. And it is also actually what we call as something that they can use to forward, relay, and also circulate and distribute message across the community members, such as technology. Mobile phone contains a lot of communications apps such as WhatsApp, Telegram. And right now, I think across the remote areas in Southeast Asia, the internet connection is very possible to reach out different group of people. So for example, when there is a flash flood, there are a lot of WhatsApp groups, for example, I found in the local remote areas in Indonesia. So the information just spread across the members in less than 5 seconds. And then the evacuation effort was just mobilized by the local disaster management officer. So this is one of the things. And then number two, not only the handheld devices, but for example, in some of the local areas in Indonesia, and also, for example, in Malaysia as well, people still use the wooden, like what we call as a kantongan, So this is to inform to the wider community that, for example, a flash flood or, for example, a landslide would occur shortly or immediately. So then the whole community member should undertake a rapid evacuation in that area. A week ago, I just came back from Kota Kinabalu, and then my hotel was just I think 2 kilometers away from the oceans. And then as a as a climate change researcher, I was asking to the hotel what happened if there is a immediate flash flood, for example. And then the receptionist told me, "Sir, just calm down. There is a siren. There is a siren, and if the siren rings only once, it means that you have to prepare. You have to prepare to be evacuated by the local officers. All right. So the first siren reflects that we as a citizen still in a safe conditions, and we don't have to be worried because we still have time to evacuate. And if the second siren rings up, then it means that we have to prepare our belongings, and we have to wrap up everything. We have to pack every single things, and then if the third rings means that we have to go to much higher altitude locations. So it means that we have to save ourselves and following the regulations and rules and instruction from the local community. So that's the objectified one. But also we need to also consider other technical capitals. For example, in some community members, there are mosques, and then the mosques have a loudspeaker, right? And in my fieldwork in Pakistan, in Indonesia as well, the loudspeaker in mosque are also used to distribute or circulate the information when there is like a flash flood or landslides, and then the community leaders and also other government sectors can evacuate the local community as soon as possible. And also the last but not least is what we call as the social cultural capital. So the social cultural capital here refers to a different type of actors who are engaged in the social networkings of the community. Number one could be government, business sector, and also civic organizations or non-government organizations, non-profit organizations, and the community leaders. And also these actors should be involved in the management and the governance of the climate change mitigations and adaptation in the community. And so, for example, in one of the exercise I did in one of the coastal areas in Indonesia, where the flash flood is really prone to the community members, because all of the members are fishermen, and then during the monsoon season, they're always experiencing sort of like around like 3 meters high flood, because the waters from the coastal areas were just inundating their lives and also their houses. So they were working together with the local with the civil engineering students, and also the professors, and also working with the NGO to discuss about the possible financial support, and also the government provides them with the policy making, and how the local government can also help communicate this issue with the national level government. So then these adaptations can be encapsulated in the national level mitigation. So in terms of the flash flood, for example, then the community come up with the solutions. For example, they have established a tilted house, like 2 stories house, where the first one, the basement is just for the garage. And so they keep everything like their belongings, their refrigerators, and also televisions, and also all of the household equipments are on the second floor.
Important.
And then, yes, exactly. I think Malaysia and Brunei got this kind of housing system, right? Yeah. And also all of the key rooms for studying, for the community meetings are on the second floor. So this is actually one of the adaptations to the climate change that have been developed by the committee members. And I think this kind of indigenous knowledge should be taken into account for sort of like policy brief. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. Right, thank you. I think although that we have some cultural differences, perhaps language barriers, but I think we can, or perhaps it's already been established, a common international language like as you said, the emergency responses. I like the one siren means that you just have to be careful and cautious, and the third sirens means go and find a higher elevations to save your life. Right, Dr. Sri. So I believe that you have actively engaged with the community in particularly spreading the awareness of disaster and climate change. So from your experience, what do the community actually want to hear? And how can we be in the fast lane in spreading the information, particularly about climate change?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, actually, I agree with Dr. Alams, about the importance of community engagement. So, when we enter the communities, we try to disseminate the three health concepts, such as of course the first one is the self-health concept. Try to make them self themselves first. That is one. Of course, if they want to to be safe, themselves to be safe, they need the knowledge, that we fill the gap of the knowledge to them. Of course, after they can stand, they can go to the second step, to community health. They can go to the community to help the vulnerable people, the handicapped people, or something like that. And then if they're strong enough, community strong enough, they can go to the third step. This is the national health. We try to give them such like this one. So just let's an example. The talking about the sea level rise, in Thailand. We learn, of course, from Indonesia. Maybe Dr. Alam can explain better than me that. We know that the government already decided to move to Kalimantan, Nusantara. So the way to implement such kind of policy very interested for us, because if in Thailand we just talk about, oh, we have to move Bangkok, it's a big issue. So many stakeholders against, and you will be, you cannot go to anywhere freely because of somebody can hit you because, oh, you said Bangkok have to move, something like that. So why Indonesia and Jakarta can do this one? Very important to learn from them. Of course, scientific data is most important, of course. And then how to disseminate, how to educate the people. This is how to do this. We would like to know, So not only that's one of example. We know very well that from Netherlands, from maybe Venice, maybe from Korea or Japan, in order to mitigate such kind of project, sea level rise, after we decide today, maybe it will be finished next 20 years. Because many stakeholders you have to take participate in such kind, and construction maybe take 5 years, 7 years, but participation and many colons, so it's a big issue. So how we can do this, I have experience. I am the first man to talk about this in Bangkok, and then after we talk a lot in this, and as I tell you that business section, first one, real estate business sector have to be suffer, because the land price will be down, something like that. So that is one problem. And then if business section such as real estate have suffered, how they can support the government, the police to do this kind of mitigation? Now come to the problem. Of course, I don't speak about the community fishery, fishery problem, and other kind of environmental problems also will happen. If Professor Simon also, if you have the experience such kind, please tell us right? Please give a good practice how to do this one. Yeah. Okay. I just this is example for you, Dr. Wahana. Yeah.
All right. Thank you. I think the question is directly to you, Prof. Simon, do you have any views on that?
On the issue of persuading people the economic benefits, or
Yes. I think that's what the three is stressing on.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, I think this comes back to many of these challenges are also challenges that arise because of different timescales of different priorities that people have. So we talked already about the timescale of elected officials. You know, I spent most of my life in the UK, where the government changes at least every 4 years, and sometimes it doesn't change, and you wish it did. You know, but the timescale of the politicians is such that they're thinking about the next 4 years, and thinking beyond that can be something that doesn't hit their consciousness so importantly. And similarly with you know, if we talk about property prices and land and changing land use patterns, there'll be winners and losers, and clearly the losers are going to shout loudest.
Okay.
But maybe I should come back to the point I made in the very first comments I made, which is that we're talking here from the perspective of universities. And universities are long-term organizations. You know, universities expect to be around for decades, maybe centuries. Yeah, and we serve people who are starting their careers, starting their life journeys. And these people are the young people, you know, the teenagers, the 18, 20-year-olds are the people who have most to lose and most to gain by taking the right decisions now. So we do have to, I guess, persuade commerce and politicians that the long-term view of the young voter or the young consumer or the young business leader is the one that really has the most weight. And in Western Europe, for example, the impact of groups like Extinction Rebellion, who go out onto the street every Friday to protest, makes an impact with the politicians, because actually this then gains traction with the general population, and it's something that you can't be ignored. And so it has changed environmental policy, I think. And you know, the impact of the COP conferences, whether they succeed or not, at least they have got governments together to think long term and to recognize some of these targets, and the UN Sustainable Development Goals similarly. But so, you know, that move of Indonesia to move the capital from Jakarta, which is essential because, you know, the Jakarta is challenged not only by sea level rise, but also by land subsidence, and it's clear, it's obvious. Similarly, in Southeast Asia, Vietnam, I think, is, you know, coastal cities in Vietnam, you see those changing significantly. And we, as a region, have so many coastal cities that are under threat over the next 20 years. Yeah, that short-term land value can't be the thing that makes our decisions. Yeah, we really have to think longer term.
Okay.
How we do that? Well, that's a question of politics and voice. And coming back to, you know, Zaini's comment about writing to your local representative to make your view clear. Yeah.
Right, Prof. Salman, I think we have been discussing for, I think, about 1 hour and a half, but I think mostly we are focusing on the privileged community. You know, like us that, you know, have access to the education, higher education, to the university, to the information. But I think climate change essentially affects all, yes, Prof. Simon, and the most vulnerable recipients are the poor and marginalized people, although they contributed the least. So since university is more of the, for privileged community, how can we maximize potential of green agenda to the less privileged people, where their most priority every day is only to put food on the table, Prof?
Yeah, that's a good point. And I suppose one of the roles that we have, that we believe that we have in universities, is that we believe that we are educating the next generation of leaders. So this is important because although they may be privileged, they're the people that have influence, will have influence potentially, we hope, in shaping policy, shaping behavior. And also we're teaching teachers. Yeah. So we have, and teachers are possibly the most critical, one of the most critical components in our future. So even the marginalized, they will, can only be lifted out of poverty through education, I believe, and through improvements in society of that type. So clearly people for whom the highest priority is survival, is having a home, having a job, having food, these people, those priorities are going to trump any other long-term plan. So we need to provide societies that both support the marginalized, but also immediate support, but also provide long-term sustainable lifestyles and directions. So one of the challenges, I think, I'm coming back to the group I mentioned just now, Extinction Rebellion. Extinction Rebellion believe that energy transition has to happen today. Okay, they talk of climate crisis and transition happening, as a priority. Of course, in some ways, that's a position of privilege, because with energy transition comes energy poverty potentially. And one of the reasons that we have the climate crisis is that we've had access to cheap energy for 200 years. I'm British. we're a big part of the problem. The Industrial Revolution started in England, in the 18th century, and we started burning coal and developed an economy as a result of cheap energy. And cheap energy from fossil fuels is a difficult challenge to address, because transition is going to involve economic change, and doing that, managing that in a way that doesn't further marginalize the poorest in society is something that we have to pay attention to. So these problems, it comes back to this problem of a system. These are systemic problems that I'm not sure the solutions are black and white and easy, but the challenges are certainly clear. Yeah.
Right. Right. Thank you, Prof.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, you were saying something. Please go ahead.
No, I was just saying that these are interesting challenges. I mean, interesting challenges. It makes it sound trivial, but they're important as well. And so I think they're good and important topics for universities to be leading in thought leadership for, and in providing advice to policymakers.
Right. Right. Thank you, Prof. Sticking on Prof. Simon's points, Dr. Zaini, as a waste management expert, I thought that maybe that we can go to the simplest, lifestyle that we have been preaching on, that is to minimize the single-use plastic. Yep, I think because the keyword there is transition and the poor community, and I think the fast approach of food container is the single-use plastic. So what do you think, in your opinion, how can we maximize the potential of just one simple activity for this kind of community, Dr. Zaini?
Okay, thank you, Dr. Hannah. I'm back to what I just mentioned before, that we've done a lot of any programs in either technicals or we involve the community and so on. But when back to the how to implement, I think that is something that crucial actually, because the thing is, from my perspective, and then from what many of my students done study in terms of waste management at the local community levels, at the shop house and any others stakeholders. But when it comes to the how they want to involve is another thing, because I think the very important is the enforcement itself, because we back to the guideline, we are very good in that thing. I mean, some of the community also, they are good in involve use of the plastic bag and whatever. We done a research and a lot of research on technical parts and so on. But back to the what I just mentioned before, when it comes to the enforcement, we are very weak in the kinds of part. So I think from my study as well, we find that most of the community, they're aware about how to use the of the plastic bag and so on. But when it comes to the enforcement, there is something lacks in that part. And then one more thing, I think sometimes the salesperson itself, they offer, if we didn't bring a plastic bag or whatever, they say, okay, we can charge you 20 cents or 40 cents or something like that. So I think this is quite common. So I mean, people, they're willing to pay a 20 cents instead of bring their own bag, something like that. So I think we need to back to the guideline is there, but the enforcement is very, very important thing lah. I think because like the developed country, for example, they are very strict. Like I mean, the guidelines they are follow, and then in terms of enforcement, they do it quite well. But when back to what happens in Malaysia, I think there's something that we think to need to something to think about that. So back to the enforcement is very important. That is my opinion.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Zaini. I think that is one of the mitigation that I think the Malaysia is practicing on, and hopefully that it will give a very good outcome later. So Dr. Meridian, I think you have spoke a lot on flash floods, extreme events. So I think one of it is the adaptation. So in the era of the Generation Z, I think I believe you are the most youngest here of the panelists.
Yeah.
So how can we equip the community on strategies of post-disaster extreme events to avoid long-term consequences, and the community can quickly recover? So I think we have talked quite a lot on mitigation steps, and so why don't we slowly transit to the how can we do in terms of adaptation? How can we create an adaptive social protection system for ASEAN countries, for example?
All right. So if we are observing the demographic structure in Southeast Asian countries, 60% and above are young people, and then their age are ranging from the 17 to around 17 to 40 years old. So 40 is considered in some countries, like in Brunei, are still young people. It means that we are requiring a different approach to involving them in our community-based decision-making process, and also community-based policy-making process that are more youth-led approach or youth-led solutions. And then what I did in the past with some other communities, not only in Malaysia, but also when I visited, like for example, other countries where remote areas are quite far away from the urbans, we were collecting the young people, the young peoples, and then the young people's, for example, organizations. And then we were setting up like different plans, how our plans are also inclusive and engageable and immersible for those who are older than us, because we cannot neglect the presence of the older people in our community. So we split the plans into two brackets. So the adaptations for the young people that they can do, and the adaptation effort for those who are older than us. And also from the plan, in the next stage, we are developing sort of like identifications on the present natural catastrophes, or for example, what happened in the last few years in this community in this community and its vicinity. For example, in some areas identified that the flash floods are the major problems. In other areas could be landslides, and in other areas could be typhoon. So each community experienced different type of the climate change induced natural disasters. And then we were also including this kind of identifications in our plan. So we moved back to our plan. And then in the next stage, we were also what we call as the establishing the feasible actions according to our identifications and our mappings on the cultural capital that are available in the community members, such as I mentioned earlier, we have like 3 types: embodied capital, knowledge, information that are available in the community or in the indigenous people around them. And also we were also identifying what's kind of the objectified cultural capitals that are held by the majority of the community members. And we were also paying attention to some of the cultural matters amongst the young people and also the older community. For example, the older citizens are not able to use mobile phone, and they are more direct communication. So we're not prioritizing the use of the mobile phone, WhatsApp, Telegram for disseminating and circulating informations, while the young peoples are more interested and captivated in the use of the Facebook and WhatsApp, Telegram, and so on and so forth. And we were also identifying around the community, like for example, within the 5-kilometer distance, are there any business sectors or the government officers or government's office we can work together? And also, are there any NGOs within our community locations, for example? Then from there, we were setting up like different approach how to engage with these different stakeholders. Of course, the government requires different ways of persuading them to embark in our community members, but we need to take a lot of coping mechanism with negotiating with the government. Of course, they are consisting of the bureaucrats, the government officials, and their education backgrounds are also varied. And also, yeah, so, and in terms of the NGO, they are more grassroots based works. So they are more easily approachable by us. And so, but the good thing is that the NGO are commonly establishing very strong networks with the international civic organization. And this is a great opportunity for us as a young people to connect us with their social networks. So this is kind of a, and by associating us with other or establishing network with the other international NGO, this is a great sort of space for us to allow our voice on the climate change mitigation to be heard internationally and in the worldwide. So that's my views.
No, you can take a breather, but I'm still gonna go with you because we have a question from Facebook and from Maimun, Aceh Province, Indonesia.
Right.
So her question is about socio-cultural perspective. So I think I'm going to stick with you. So her question is, the problem of climate change is it related to the behavior problems of community groups? So she gives an example of burning forests. So what are the preventions or preventive methods from a socio-cultural perspective? So if you could give just about 2 minutes on this.
All right, about the forest, about the forest burn, about the forest fires or forest, like forest trees failing as well, like the cut down of the trees, like the illegal logging. I think we have to be mindful that not all of the committee members are the culprit or the perpetrator of the forest fires, and as the committee members who were burning the forest or did the illegal logging or unethical environmental behavior are those who were requiring money for their subsistence or their basic livelihood or just to buy food. So we need to give we need to sort of provide them with the alternative that are suitable to their needs and required expectations, not just to give them, like, for example, incentive, like a certain amount of money. Hey, I will be giving you this huge amount of money, but then you need to stop cutting the trees. But that's not a feasible solution. So we have to map. We have to create sort of like a map, the community-based environmental mappings. What key causes leading them to cutting down the trees and then selling in the town, and then what's the feasible solutions? For example, providing alternative employment to these community members. And then number two, we can give them sort of like the most feasible incentive, non-financial incentive. For example, involving them in the local community works that can give them like in-kind resources like a food, and they can access like a microcredit for financing their livelihood and to purchase some food supplies, for example. And also we can give incentive that if they are active in protecting our environment or the forested areas, then they will be more supported by the government in terms of, for example, accessing the welfare fund and so on and so forth. And also number four, there is actually in some of traditional community, local folklore are still coexisting. Like in Norway, there is a folklore. It's called like the Askeladen, and it's still taught to primary schoolers in Norway, where if they are grown up and then they cut down the trees in one of the forested areas, it is sinful for them, and then they will experience sort of like very bad nightmares if they do so. And in other countries like Thailand, Indonesia, Malaysia, in some of the local cultures, these kind of folklores are also still existing, and we can apply this kind of folklore to educate them about the importance of the relationship between the human being and also the God and also the spiritual powers around them.
Okay, right. Thank you. Oh, I really liked, transferring knowledge through folklore, perhaps, sing a song to the young generation on how can we combat climate change instead of rasa sayang, hey.
Yeah.
Right. Dr. Sri, we have another question but I think it's more suitable to you. You talk a lot about, politics contribution, political will. So one of the question is that the program tourism management really respond to combat the climate change, where the research focus on resolving the problems, but the problem we encounter is not about the research, it's not about the technical, but it's the lack of support and lack of political will on implementing, and also the lack of knowledge on people. So he or she would like to know what could be the best avenue to address on about the climate change, and that we integrate all sorts of information there.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I forget one thing that the how community network in Thailand becoming strong. One of the information issue that we try to tell them that of course even though the politicians or governors comes to your land or come to every 2 to 4 years to lend your land, right? You are the owners, right? Why you don't have any voice for future developments? That's why they become thinking about that. They have to have their voice, yeah, for future development. That is one thing. And then communities recently become more concerned about the concept in terms of the nature-based solution. So actually, sometimes is related with the indigenous knowledge, right? So they know very well that most of the policymakers will come with the great infrastructure to their lands, right? Of course, great infrastructure, we cannot say that great infrastructure is not good, something like that. Right? So it is the role of university or education, how to blend and how to mix between this kind of concept, clean and great infrastructure, and then coming with the very practical solutions. Of course, sometimes in Thailand, the community against the flood wall very much. They don't like flood wall, but they like the monkey cheese, something like that. Monkey cheese, so small monkey cheese and connect together, something like that. Right? But only monkey cheese cannot solve the problem. Right? That's why we come with the rigid structure, maybe some wall, some economic zones only, not the whole area, something like that. So to balance this two kind of concept, this is the role of university. I think that try to make them understand. Of course, the other thing is that as I work with communities, that I found that even though most of the politician or political willingness try to come up with their hard structures, something like that. But with the information or scientific data from educations, can raise them their education, that they can understand, they can accept some policy makers about how the policy maker would like to do this thing, right? Because of as Professor Simon says, 2 or 4 years is their period, so they cannot think about 10 years, they cannot think about 20 years. But you are the owner, you have to think, right? So that's why I try to advise for myself that let's have election, governor election. That's why if you have, you can solve many problems in terms of my idea, but the long way to go from my country, right? To have like that. We have only in Thailand, we have only 2 areas that elected by the people. One, of course, Bangkok. The other one is Pattaya. Only 2 areas. And then we find that we have to go that way. I don't know. My answer is fit your question or not.
Exactly. Thank you, Dr. Shah. I think it's in ideal world that would be the case. Prof. Simon, you mentioned about agriculture being one of the sectors that is heavily affected by the climate change, as it is a very climate sensitive. So for example, me being an ASEAN who is a rice eater, how can I as a consumer or for the paddy producer to take proactive measures, not only relying on the government? I think because mostly we're saying that, government need to do that, government need to do this, but we as an individual, how can we have a voluntary effort as a community?
Well, Dr. Sakawi, I think you mentioned earlier this morning the impact of food on sustainability and climate and food types of food consumption. And we know that different types of food have different carbon footprints. Different types of agriculture have different carbon footprints, and one of my own personal areas of research has been on methane emissions. And we know that, for example, rice paddy fields can be associated with significant methane emissions, but different ways of adopting agricultural practices can limit and mitigate some of those emissions. So there are different approaches that could be made, different approaches I think that science can offer some solutions in genetically modified crops, for example, to limit the use of agrochemicals, which also have very high embedded carbon. So there are two ways. One is the production, one is the consumption. In agricultural production, I think there are potential routes that we can adopt that reduce greenhouse gas emissions. So, for example, we know that beef has the highest climate impact. We know that, vegetarianism has the lowest climate impact. But the challenge becomes that as societies become richer, people expect to eat more meat. If you look at, for example, if you look at China, the meat consumption in China over the last few decades has increased rapidly because of economic development, and so that becomes a challenge. That you have to modify people's expectations and people's recognition of the impact of individual behavior. And then aside from that, the impact of agriculture generally on climate is another factor. But then the other direction, the impact of climate on agriculture is also going to be a significant challenge. And there'll be winners and losers, clearly. In tropical latitudes, we can see that increased CO2 will actually fertilize increased biological productivity. So as long as there's enough water around and enough soil that is still high quality, then and enough land area, then agricultural productivity may increase. But drought, changes in temperature, changes in the regions in which particular species, plant species can be grown are also going to cause changes. So I think the whole aspect of climate change is it isn't simply changing climate, it's change in all aspects of life almost. It's going to be, there are going to be changes in areas where humans can operate easily. Can manual laborers work during the day, under increased temperature? Will there be enough water? Where is the land going to be under threat? So there are going to be changes. So adaptation is always challenging because, again, it comes back to this issue of winners and losers. There's going to be
Right. Yes. Thank you, Prof. I think from your points there, I think you're stressing the climate change is more than environmental crisis. It's a social crisis. As we develop more, we have more technology. We are actually imposing more threats on our Mother Earth environment. So I think to wrap up the session, there's one question. There's a lot of questions in the chat box, but I think due to limited time, I think I'm going to take one question, I think, which is very, very important and provoking. And I would like for each panel to answer. And we'll start with Dr. Zaini. Is climate change a reversible process? Yes, Dr. Zaini, what do you think about that? Dr. Zaini,
so maybe I can leave it to for Simon to answer that one. I just concerned about one question from the floor is from Muhammad Fairuz regarding the role of the academia.
Okay.
So that Muhammad Fairuz mentioned that instead of university offer courses, undergrads doing a master's and PhD, so what's the others role that the academia can do instead of to reduce the climate change and the environmental impacts. So as we mentioned before, that I think like our concerns in UKMs, I think in the other university as well, there's a transfer knowledge to the community. I think this is a very our concern now. And then not even we produce programs for masters or PhD as well, but we also have many programs such like Sea Nature. I think is quite excellent programs. We award quite many medals from the national levels. So how they educate the young, the primary school student, and then how to embrace, and then the participant, and then back to the school, and then they give the knowledge to the friends and the others community as well. So I think that this is very important thing that we need to think. And then we also have the involved with the plans for the 1 million trees. And then also we educate the student, the community, how to save, how to conserve the trees and everything. And then the number one is the challenges to us to give the awareness. I think it's back, we need to see the attitude, the behavior amongst the community. This is very important because they're the last of the people who can to make the changes in the community or in the process of the climate change and the impacts of the environmental as well. So how far they want to involve and to be a responsible community to the environment. And then that is the thing that back to the community itself. Okay. And then one thing last, I think the enforcement that we must be a practice it 100%. I think I just try to answer the questions from the Mr. Muhammad Fairuz.
All right, thank
Yeah.
you. Thank you, Dr. Zaini. So I will leave it to Dr. Meridian then. I think he
Yes.
would like to answer that question.
Right.
So go ahead, Dr. Meridian. Do you think that the climate change is a reversible process?
No.
Or that
Climate
is a very straight and no nonsense
Climate
answer?
change, to be honest, climate change is not reversible process. It gets even worse, even every single second. So I've been living in the coastal areas in my first 25 years before moving to Brunei Darussalam. And every single year since I was 3, I've been observing that the sea level rise is getting higher and higher. And in the last, getting higher and higher, and also the locations are also suffering from prolonged drought, where the microclimate is even getting much worsening and worsening every single year. And some of the local vegetables are now being the challenges for the local farmers, because the local farmers are no longer able to use the organic fertilizer which they're accustomed to using in the past 25 years. And also in the last 10 years, every single years when I came home, I always heard from my parents-in-law that every single month there are 2 whales stranded in the bay, like not only 1 or 2 but 3, and and on the other occasion there were like dolphins dying on the bay. Why this? When I checked with some of the articles published like in nature journals, why these whales were stranded in some of the coastal areas in Indonesia and other, like for example in Malaysian Peninsula. And because they were confused, they were so much ambivalent with the rapidly changing climate in the oceans. Like perhaps in 25 years ago, the sea level temperature were quite instability, but now the sea level rise has been so much affecting and influencing their biological radars. So this happened to their memories, and then they are no longer able to sort of like finding out ways to come back to their to their home or natural habitat. So yeah, and it takes a lot of like 4 trucks to remove the, to remove the corpse from the coastal areas, and it takes a lot of like more than 5 villages too.
Right.
And
Must be
yeah,
hard.
yeah. So this is like a frequent occurrence, and it happens like in the last 10 years.
Okay.
Hmm.
Right. Prof. Simon, I would like, if it's possible, you answer another question is, what happens if we do nothing to stop the climate change?
Sorry, was that to me? Or?
Yes, please.
Oh.
So then I'll end with Dr. Suri.
So I was going to come back to. I'll come back to the first question though, because I'm going to offer a different answer.
Okay, if that be the case, then that question will be given to Dr. Suri.
because actually, again, this is coming. I'm speaking now as a geologist. We know from Earth history that the Earth actually is quite good at regulating itself, despite what we as humans do. And there was a time, it's called the Paleocene-Eocene thermal maximum, if you want to know the technical term, but it's about 53 million years ago. There was a spike in carbon dioxide globally, and it did come back to normal, but it came back over a timescale. The natural timescale for re-equilibration of the Earth, as it were, is about 100,000 years. Mm-hmm. So climate change will potentially, all of the carbon that's been pumped into the atmosphere by burning fossil fuels, and the fossil fuels were there actually formed from plants and animals that died hundreds of millions of years ago. So what we've done is we've taken carbon that was stored in the Earth from biological activity in the past and just released it all at once into the atmosphere by burning. There are processes within the Earth that can draw this CO2 back down into the Earth, but it will take 100,000 years, which of course for humans is irrelevant. Mm-hmm. So the question really isn't about what will happen to the Earth. The question is about what will happen to us and to the life on Earth that we share the planet with. And I think what we're going through, from a geological perspective, what we're going through is a mass extinction. So this has happened 5 times over the history of life on Earth. And I think we're going through a current mass extinction. Biodiversity, we're losing species globally. This will be apparent to geologists, 10 million years in the future. If they look at us now, they will see big changes in what has happened on Earth. The question is, can we learn from that to try and address the problem today for us? And so some of the work that I'm doing at the moment in my research is trying to find ways to accelerate the natural feedback processes that the Earth has for regulating greenhouse gases. And if you look at the targets, the COP targets for 1.5 degrees for the Paris Agreement, I don't think we're going to hit one. We're going to manage to keep within 1.5 degrees. We're already gone to 1.2 degrees above pre-industrial temperatures. The challenge now is, can we keep it below 2? I mean, 2 is going to be, no one really knows what the world will look like when it's 2 degrees warmer. But even to do that, it's not sufficient just to go to 0 carbon. Actually, we need to start to go to negative carbon. So we need to start to get CO2 out of the atmosphere, back into plant life, into rocks, into the oceans, to get it out of the atmosphere. So there are research activities going on to see how we can accelerate CO2 reduction in the atmosphere. People mentioned planting trees many times. Planting trees, growth of plants, is one way that we take CO2 out of the atmosphere back into the biosphere. And other routes exist as well. So there are research projects looking at whether we can put CO2 back into soil, make soil, put carbon into soil and make soil more productive. So it's a double win. In particular, in tropical soils, we're interested in putting things like biochar into soil that will enhance the soil and remove CO2. So coming back to the original question, is it reversible?
Yes.
No, not on a human. So I do agree that, you know, on a human timescale, I think we're going to look at adaptation as much as mitigation, which is concerning. But we can't stop there. We really need to think about negative emissions and into the next century. That's going to be important, I think.
All right. Right. Thank you, Prof. So I will end the session with Dr. Sri. So before that, I would like to say thank you so much for the audiences that who gave feedbacks and comments and suggestions. I apologize for not able to address all, but I will say that, you know, thank you to Dr. Rodel, my friend here, Professor Hasnain, anonymous attendee. There's another anonymous attendee. There's another anonymous attendee, and Mr. Brian Carino. And I would like to end this session with the last question from Associate Professor Dr. Abdul Rahman. What happens if you do nothing to stop climate change? And I think Dr. Sri will provide us a very powerful statement as a take-home message to the audiences. Please, Dr. Sri.
Yeah. I think that we have strong evidence from the latest IPCC AR6 that the rising temperatures came from anthropogenic forcings, right? Very strong evidence. Only natural forcing cannot rise this kind of temperature, right? So what Professor Simon says, I will agree, because it depends on the time scale. Right? IPCC doesn't tell anything about how about after 1,000 years future, what happened. We don't know, right? If we can stop carbon dioxide releasing perfectly, what will happen? We don't know, right? When that time to be fulfilled is maybe next 200 years, I don't know, right? This is the limited of the scientific base that we have now, right? So there is a my idea that we cannot say that it's irreversible or reversible. It depends on time frame, right? Mm-hmm. So that's the thing, yeah.
Right. So what do you think that what happens? Will it be, you know, a catastrophic to the Earth? Will the Earth be, you know, split into two if we do not do anything about?
Yeah, of course. Even though now is 1.1 degree rising, right? We have such kind of catastrophic phenomena. Yeah. So maybe in the next 8 years, if we cannot have emissions, of course, what will happen? We can expect more frequently, yeah. And some of the past maybe hit stronger than last 10 years and now, yeah.
All right, thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Sri. With that, I think the forum ends now. I would like to say thank you so much to the panelists for the invaluable insights and the audiences who have been a good sport. We had a very interactive discussion. So I would like to conclude that, you know, looking at the title of our discussion today, Climate Leaders. I think climate leaders are essentially all of us, not only the government, not the academics, not the universities, but each individual of us can have a significant contribution in saving the Earth. So before I pass back the mic to the MC, I think the MC there is looking ready. I'll end the forum with a sentence quoting from the brilliant Greta Thunberg. To all of you who choose to look the other way every day because you seem more frightened of the changes that can prevent catastrophic climate change than the catastrophic climate change itself, your silence is worst of all. But I believe all of us here, we will not be in silence. We will keep fighting, motivated, and do our best in preserving our beloved Earth. So with that, thank you very much. And back to you, Mrs. Z.
Thank you very much, Dr. Hannah. And thank you so much to all distinguished panelists for such an inspiring discussion today. Okay, I hope that we will bring back the best practices shared by the panelists in facing the challenges of embracing culture and language while enriching internationalization at our own institution. Okay, with that, once again, I would like to invite Mr. Azrul Hamza, Deputy Director, Center for Leadership Sustainability, AKEPT, to close today's webinar.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Thank you again, Madam Z. again, thank you very much to our honorable speakers, Prof. Zaini, Prof. Simon, Prof. Meridian, Prof. Sri, and not to forget our very able and dynamic moderator, Prof. Hana, for having this insightful and very enlightening session today. And allow me to convey my heartiest appreciation to every single one in this digital room today for the first ever series on webinar Leaders for Climate Change, and listening the sharing by our experts all around ASEAN with the themes of university and sustainable communities towards a green agenda. Again, thank you very much to UKM for the strategic collaboration together with AKEPT via our Center of Leadership for Sustainability to successfully implement this, I would say, outreach program for on a very timely issue on climate change. Ladies and gentlemen, and also let us give a round of applause to our panelists for their valuable time and contribution in this program. And once again, not to forget to all the participants from different backgrounds across ASEAN, and also who helped this program to be successful, because this session wouldn't be successful without the collaboration from everyone. Again, we are always excited to learn, relearn, and share with members and partners as we continue to equip ourselves with knowledge that will assist us in leading the others, be it the student, subordinates, colleagues, or even the community. Ladies and gentlemen, developing on innovation strategy requires holistic and comprehensive strategic and systematic leadership in every generation. So the university, as one of the birthplace of matured education, is an instrument that can form a unity in dealing in climate change, using the medium of knowledge as a factor to equalize this position. Thus, university can play a very important role in addressing the effects and impacts of climate change. The university not only contributes greatly to the local community, also to the global community by equipping graduates with comprehensive knowledge and providing global awareness. Hence, the awareness, the implementation of webinars such as this is to achieve its main goal, which is to the university contribution in dealing with the effect and impact of the climate change through local action plans against climate change, whether in Malaysia or across the region, to present various strategies and to strengthen the university contribution in overcoming the effects and impact of the climate change and towards shaping the 2030 generation. Ladies and gentlemen, we have listened to the panelists, their sharing of experience and knowledge, and I believe all of us have gained a very handful takeaways from this series. In short, the first series has emphasized the role and readiness of the universities in adapting educational policy, curriculum, climate change, and how to harness transformative power to impact sustainable community. My fellow audience, if I can highlight a few pertinent points that have been highlighted throughout this webinar, I realized that there are three key main takeaway that we see that number one, climate change issue is not only an environmental issue, it is also a multidisciplinary issue that involves security, whether it is natural disaster or food security. And this is something like alarming. We know that this food security has been a new highlight in Malaysia, especially where we are aware that the government have put extra effort in order to look into food security seriously. As we are aware, the climate change has contributed towards global warming. The food stockpile is really in dire attention, especially from the government. And on top of that, we'll see a change of lifestyle, and even political landscape of a country have shifted from the traditional way to highlighting issues on climate change. And number two, ladies and gentlemen, it would be on emerging issues. That is the importance of educating students, the future leaders, that the higher education institution or university roles have diversified from academic-centric towards building the leaders and even shaping the human capital for the nation. And lastly, over and above that, we would see that, as mentioned also by the panel, that data is a new goal. Those who possesses vast amount of data and able to do strategic data mining may conquer the world. Ladies and gentlemen, as the co-host of this program, we hope the knowledge sharing session has become one of the best sharing platform, especially on this particular topic, for us to move forward in line with climate change. Indeed, AKEPT is looking forward to organizing more programs such as this to disseminate leadership knowledge worldwide. And we mentioned about leadership is not only about those who can sit at the senior post, managing and administrating an organization. We are looking into a dynamic leaders that can shape the future. Ladies and gentlemen, finally, once again, I would like to convey our special thanks to all the panelists, participants, and of course, our partner, UKM, for the hard work and the collaboration and cooperation rendered. My deepest thanks are also, of course, reserved to these committees, our team from AKEPT, and definitely also from UKM, for the smooth running of the event, the first series of webinar on leaders for climate change. Till we meet again for the second series. Until then, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you very much and take care, everyone. Be safe.
Waalaikumsalam. Thank you, Mr.
Thank
Azrul, for
you.
the closing remark. Ladies and gentlemen, we have now approached the end of our webinar. Before we end, we are going to show you two videos prepared by the Institute of Climate Change, UKM, and AKEPT. Oh, by the way, the link of the feedback form and certificate form will be given during a video presentation. Please kindly fill in the feedback form upon leaving the webinar. Once completed, you receive an e-certificate for attending the webinar. For those watching live streaming by Facebook, the link for the feedback form will be shared soon. On behalf of the organizer, we would like to thank the panelists and all our supportive audience for your cooperation in realizing today's event. Not forgetting the International Office of Local Universities, UKM Global, partner universities from across the globe, and also the technical team from Institute of Climate Change, UKM, Faculty of Medicine, UKM, and Center for Information Technology, UKM, for the technical support. Once again, thank you for your time and hope to see you again in our future webinars entitled Universities' Roles in the Climate Change Battle, Leadership in ASEAN Universities in March 2023. Thank you very much. Terima kasih. Muchas gracias. 谢谢. Till we meet again. 再见. Stay safe, everyone.
Thank you.